Well, good morning. This is Barry Odell with the Church of Christ at Mammoth Spring Facebook page. It's Monday morning, October 10th, 2022. Hope everybody's doing well today. We've got folks joining on. We're on, of course, the Church of Christ at Mammoth Spring page. We're also cross-posted onto the nearchurches.com Facebook page. And if you're on either one of those pages and you're listening, you can comment, you can ask questions. Please feel free to do that. And when I see them, I will address them. And let's see who we've got on here so far who have greeted us. Lyle, good to see you. Diana, Janie, good morning. Linda, Michelle, Wayne, Gail, good to see all of you guys on here today. And there are others who are watching who don't comment, and that's okay. But if you do have questions or comments, feel free to use the comment section here, and I'll acknowledge them when I see them. Good morning, Miss Marisa. Good to see you on here. And also, once the live stream is over, I download the video to my to my computer, and then I upload it to our YouTube channel. So all of these videos are on YouTube, and the comment section is open on YouTube. So if you have questions or comments and you're watching on that platform, feel free to do that. And when I get around to it, because it's not live on YouTube, when I get around to it, I'll acknowledge those questions or comments. All right, good to see everybody today. So let's get started. We're in this study of premillennialism. Good morning, Norma, over on the Near Churches page. Premillennialism, and we've defined all that, so we're not going to go back over all of that. But today what we're going to talk about is it's in the sequence of what is believed will happen at the return of Christ. Of course, we've talked about the rapture, and so hey, there's Connie. Good morning, Connie Barden and Williams. Good to see you. So I'm going to put this diagram back up here that I had up here the other day, and this is from an actual premillennial source. I didn't make this up myself. This comes from them. So these are their thoughts, and we always want to be fair. We want to represent accurately what others believe. I don't want to be misrepresented. I don't want to be misquoted, so I don't want to do that for anybody else. So here is their timeline, let's say, of what's going to happen in view of the millennium, in view of the 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. And like I said, there are a lot of tentacles to this doctrine, but we're focusing on the most popular, the most well-known version of dispensational premillennialism, different periods of time. So they say right now, as we pointed out the other day, I'll use my cursor here, that you and I, that we are in the church age right here, past the cross. Jesus died on the cross, and from that point in time until the rapture is known as the church age. Okay, so at the end of the church age, the church is going to be raptured. Jesus is coming for his saints. Okay, and that's important to know, that he's coming for his saints. It's a secret coming. We talked about this again the other day in a previous video. The rapture is coming. What's going to happen in the... I don't even like to say in Christ's coming at the rapture, because the belief is he's not coming. He's going to rapture away the church out of the earth. The reason for that is because on the earth, there's going to be a 7-year tribulation. And most places, and we'll talk about this a bit today, most folks who hold this view say that 7 years is going to be divided in half, according to Daniel 9:27. We're going to look at Daniel 9 today and talk about that. But anyway, at the rapture, they say Jesus is going to rapture or take away the saints from the earth, take them to heaven. They'll be in paradise for 7 years. At the end of those 7 years, Jesus will come with his saints. At that point in time, you see this box down here. You'll have the Battle of Armageddon. You'll have the restoration of tribulation saints. They're going to come back, okay, because they've been taken from the earth. You're going to have the judgment of the saints. The kingdom is going to be established at that point in time, the kingdom of Christ. That's the 1,000-year reign belief. The Jews are going to be returned to Palestine, and Satan is going to be bound for this 1,000-year period of time, the millennium. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is this period of the tribulation on earth. What are we talking about? In fact, I had a message from a friend today, a text message, and I suppose they didn't know what I was doing today, because they work throughout the day and they typically aren't able to watch my live stream. But the question was, or the thought was, I have a lot of trouble understanding the Great Tribulation. I was like, man, that's perfect. That's what we're talking about today on the live stream. So anyway, the tribulation, let's think about that. Again, this is a period of time at 7 years after the church has been raptured from the earth. This information that I'm about to share with you is source information. In other words, I got it from the source who believes it. So again, I'm not misrepresenting, I'm not making anything up. This is what they say. So 5 points they say that we need to remember about the tribulation. Number one is they say that this is a manifestation. This 7 years of earth, 7 years on earth, is going to be a manifestation of the wrath of God. Now, we're going to look at these passages later. I've got the text in the background here behind my PowerPoint, so we'll pull them up a little bit later. But the Great Tribulation is going to be a manifestation of God's wrath, and they cite Revelation chapter 16. They say that this period of time is going to be worse than anything in history. And so I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go ahead and pull this up since I've already mentioned that. It's going to be worse than anything in history. And the passage that they use to hold to that doctrine is Matthew chapter 24, and specifically Matthew chapter 24 and verse 21. So I'll highlight that here for you. Jesus there says, For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. So to folks who hold to this scheme of doctrine, this is a reference, Matthew 24:21 is a reference to some future event, okay, some event that has not yet taken place. So we need to be aware of that, all right? We're going to come back to Matthew chapter 24. What I want to do is go ahead and march through these 5 points about the tribulation. It's a manifestation of God's wrath. It's worse than anything that's ever happened in history. They then go on to say in point number 3 that it's not for the church. Okay, so what they do, what folks who hold to this this belief system is that the rapture, again, as we've already said, the church is taken out of the world. And so they cite passages like 1 Thessalonians 4, 1 Corinthians 15, passages that talk about the return of Christ, the resurrection and such. And they say that those passages are references to the rapture. So, according to this doctrine, the tribulation is not for the church because all the saints will be in heaven getting their assignments for what will be the 1,000-year reign on earth. Number 4, they say that the tribulation that's going to be on earth is for Israel. And they specifically call it the day of Jacob's trouble. And that's from Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse 7. Like I said, we'll look at these passages momentarily. And then finally they say the tribulation is for unbelievers. And they cite Revelation chapter 7. So I'm just laying out the case that they lay out. What I want us to do is examine these passages of Scripture, because that's what we're supposed to do. Are these passages teaching what this doctrine teaches? So what I want us to do is, okay, let's take a moment and let's look at each one of these passages. Wayne, good morning, Wayne. Good to see you. Would you like more info about this study to go along with what you have? Absolutely, Wayne. I'm always open to more information. So share away, man. And I know you via Facebook for a few years now, and I trust your sources and stuff. So yeah, share what you will. The passage is used to prove these beliefs, okay, about the rapture. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pop it up here on the screen, and then I'll pull the biblical text up so you can see it. So we're going to go first to Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 12, and let's see what that passage says. And is this what we're talking about? Is this a passage that deals with a time yet future that's talking about the tribulation on earth after the rapture of the church? So here's Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 12. It says, "For the day of the Lord of hosts shall come upon everything proud and lofty, upon everything lifted up, and it shall be brought low." Okay, so that's one verse that is used to teach this idea of a tribulation. Now you'll notice nothing is said here of a time frame. You know, how long is this going to last? Is it going to be on earth? Is it going to be in heaven? You know, what is this all about? This is a very vague reference, but this is one of the references that source where I got those 5 points from, this is one of their references that they used. But here's what we have to wonder. Okay, so I always like to have my hard copy of my Bible here because I use, as you guys know, If you've watched me any length of time, I use a wide margin Bible. I read from it every day. I make my own personal notes in it. And so I look at it, and that's the way it ought to be. So, and this is my personal opinion. You guys can take it for what it's worth. There's no substitute for a physical copy of the Bible. Okay? You can have it on your phone, on your iPad, or whatever, and that's perfectly fine. But there's no substitute for knowing your own sword, for knowing your own tool that you're going to use. All right, Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 12. Well, the question then is, okay, so are we going to use this one verse? Is this one verse talking about this 7-year period of time sometime down in the future, right before Christ comes back to reign on earth for 1,000 years? Is that what Isaiah is talking about? Well, the first question is, all right, well, to whom is Isaiah speaking? I mean, these questions are matters of, we're figuring out the context. So who is Isaiah writing to? When was he doing his prophetic work? Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 1, the vision of Isaiah, the son of Amoz, which he saw okay, what is he talking about and when? Well, it's about Judah and Jerusalem, and it's in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Isaiah's work spans about 50 years or so, about 750 to 700 BC. That's what he's talking about. So then we get there to chapter 2, and we have that reference there in verse 12 of this day of trouble that's coming. But here's the setting of the context. Again, this idea of who is he talking to? Look at Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 5. O house of Jacob, come and let us walk in the light of the Lord. For you have, and this is talking about God. God had forsaken his people, they felt, says the house of Jacob. Well, why? Why would God turn away from his people? Because they're filled with eastern ways. They are soothsayers like the Philistines, and they are pleased with children of the foreigners. Their land is full of silver and gold, and there's no end to their treasures. Their land is also full of horses. Well, the point being, they're doing things that God had strictly forbidden them to do. Why was their relationship with God broken? Because they were unfaithful to God. It's in that context that we get down to verse 12. Well, and in fact, we'll start in verse 11 here in Isaiah 2. The lofty looks of man shall be humbled, the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. What day? Well, the day of the Lord of hosts. It's going to come upon everything proud and lofty. And that's what we were just reading about back up in verse 5 and 6 and 7. And verse 8, the land is full of idols. They worship the work of their own hands. Isaiah is speaking to the people of his day. And he's looking forward, well, not looking forward to, but he's predicting, that's a better way to say it, their captivity that's going to come to the house of Judah. Well, Judah was taken captive by the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar in 606 BC. That's what he's looking forward to. This Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 12, this verse that's used to quote-unquote prove the Great Tribulation, has nothing to do with a post-millennial, or rather a premillennial 7-year tribulation on earth. This is about the house of Judah in Jerusalem 700 years before Christ was even born. So what's my point? My point is context. If you want to know what a verse means, you have to know the context in which it was written. To whom was it written? When? Why? Where? All of that information has to be gathered. You can't just pull out one verse from a chapter and say, well, this is what it's referring to. You have to know all that other information. A second verse that's used is Zephaniah chapter 1 and verse 15. So I'll pull it up here on the screen and then I'll pop it up there for you. Zephaniah chapter 1 and verse 15. What's that verse say? That day, again, we're just jumping in the middle of a chapter here. Well, okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, devastation, desolation, darkness, gloominess, clouds and thick darkness. Zephaniah 1:15. Same questions we asked with Isaiah. When is this, what period of time is this regarding? The word of the Lord which came to Zephaniah the son of Cushai, the son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah. This is, when you look at, now let me turn over my Bible there real quick. These prophets from Isaiah to Malachi, okay, the last part of your Old Testament, they're either pre-exile or post-exile. And when we're talking about the exiles of Israel and Judah, we're talking about the trouble that they had with the Assyrians and the Babylonians. Every prophet will fit somewhere in those periods of time. Well, Zephaniah is doing his work in the days of Josiah. Josiah reigned around 640 BC. So this is about 100 years after Isaiah that we just looked at. And he's talking about this day of the Lord. And again, it's concerning, and it's during the time of the king of Judah. And notice, verse 2, I will utterly consume everything from the face of the land, says the Lord. So think about it this way. If this prophecy, okay, let me get back down here to Zephaniah 1 and verse 15. If this prophecy of darkness and gloom and wrath and distress is something that we are still waiting for in the future, then it meant nothing to the people of Zephaniah's day. It had no meaning to them at all. And that's the problem when you get into holding a doctrine like premillennialism, is you have to jump from verse to verse like we're doing without regard to the context to say, well, this verse says this. This is the day of the Lord's wrath. What day of the Lord's wrath? It's in connection with Judah during the days of King Josiah. About 600, we'll just round it, about 600 years before Christ even came to the earth the first time. So Zephaniah 1:15 cannot be a reference to the Great Tribulation, although that passage is used to quote-unquote prove the Great Tribulation. The next passage that was in that in the thing that I was looking at was Matthew 24 and 21. We may spend some time here in Matthew chapter 24, well, because it's necessary. When it comes to talking about the end times, Matthew 24 is the most, let me say, the most used and the most misused chapter in all the Bible. There are a lot of other passages that people use and reference, I understand that, but you get to Matthew 24 and people go off the deep end in regard to end-time prophecy. So they use Matthew 24 and verse 21. So let's see what that verse says. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. All right, so that sounds really bad, doesn't it? We have to ask the question, who's talking? To whom is he talking? And about what? These questions answer themselves. Jesus has been in the temple in Matthew 23 rebuking the scribes and Pharisees for their hypocrisy. They depart the temple. Well, who is the they? Well, in order to understand or to know who the they are, you have to know the parallel passage. And it's Mark chapter 13. Okay, who was with Jesus when he came out of the temple? Mark chapter 13 and verse 3. Peter, James, John, and Andrew. Look at this. Asked him privately. The discussion that's getting ready to take place here is a private discussion between 5 individuals, Jesus and these 4. Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke chapter 21. Those 3 chapters are parallel accounts of the same exact thing. So, Matthew, well, let me get back to where I was. Matthew chapter 24 and verse 21 is where we were just a second ago. And let me get back there. Still trying to learn how to use this, guys. All right, there we go. Matthew chapter 24 and verse 21. There's a day that he's talking about. Okay, now look at this. This is a heading in the scripture. The Great Tribulation. All right, there we go. There it is. This is what premillennialists are looking for. That before Jesus comes back to the earth to reign for 1,000 years, there's going to be, right here, look, the Great Tribulation. There it is. Let's just read. Who's he talking to? Peter, Andrew, James, and John in the city of Jerusalem, standing right outside the temple. He tells them, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, by the way, that's Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. Whoever reads, let him understand. Okay, so they're going to be able to see something. Jesus is talking to this crowd, these 4 individuals, and they're going to be able to see something that happens in the city of Jerusalem. So I'm turning my Bible over there real quick because, I like to have my own text in front of me. Standing in the holy place. All right? An interesting thing to do here, because we have 3 accounts of this same thing, one by Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I'm going to jump over real quick to Luke chapter 21, because Luke 21 gives us a little more insight. And we're going to start in verse 20. Notice this. He words it a bit differently. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, he's in Jerusalem. He's talking to his disciples, and he tells them, okay, notice this, context. When you see Jerusalem. I've never seen Jerusalem surrounded by armies, but he told them they would. Okay, notice this. Then know that its desolation is near. Well, who is the its? Well, Jerusalem. Its desolation is near. Then those who are in Judea, flee to the mountains. You can escape this judgment that Jesus is talking about in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. Run to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her, the her is a reference to Jerusalem, depart. And let not those who are in the country come back to town. Okay, Jerusalem was a walled city, so if you're outside doing something, do not come back into the city. Why? For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies. Notice this, and this is so important in these 3 chapters. In those days. What days? The days where Jerusalem is going to be surrounded by armies. The days where the temple is going to be destroyed. In those days. What's going to happen? For there will be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. Who were the people who lived in Jerusalem and that were connected with the temple and that knew Jesus and Peter? And it's the Jewish people. This is the center of Jewish life. There will be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations. Notice, and Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. This is so simple. Yet these chapters, Matthew, and again, particularly Matthew chapter 24, are some of the most misused passages in all the Bible. And notice even here, the heading here in Matthew 24. Jesus predicts what? The destruction of the temple. Okay, then notice this heading. The signs of the times. Well, what are the times he's talking about? Or that this heading is talking about? Notice this. Not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. This is all about Jerusalem. This has nothing to do with something that's yet in our future. And as you read, and here's one thing that I did in my Bible. As you read through this text, look, for instance, down here in verse 6, talking to those 4, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you not be troubled. Notice, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Remember, they're looking to the end of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, and there's going to be a lot that precedes it. If you do a little bit of digging on the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 by Titus and the Romans, it took about 3 years. And that's what Jesus is telling them here. You're going to see all of this, but the end isn't yet. It's not over yet. A lot of bad stuff's going to happen, but it's not over yet. And so you keep reading. Let me see if I can find it here real quick. Okay, skip down to Matthew 24 and verse 19. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies. Look at this. In those days. What days? The days when Jerusalem's going to be surrounded by armies. The days when you're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and pestilences and famines and all of this other stuff. All right? Look here then at verse 25. See, I have told you beforehand. There are going to be great signs and wonders to deceive, even if possible, the elect. Okay? Even God's people could be deceived if they allow themselves. But Jesus says, I've already told you that this is going to happen, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. This is not future for us. This is about 2,000 years old or so. A little less than that. Well, let's see here. Immediately after the tribulation, notice this, of So there's the word tribulation, but it's the tribulation of what? Those days. Not days yet for us future. It was days for them that they would see. Okay, skip down to verse, we just looked at verse 29. Let's see here. Yeah, here we go. Matthew 24, verse 34. Assuredly I say to you, this generation, talking to those 4 disciples, will by no means pass away, look at this, till all these things take place. They were going to see it happen. They could see signs. They could get out of the city. They could survive. If they were outside of the city when it happens, don't come back to the city. It's going to be hard if you're pregnant. It's going to be hard if you're nursing a baby. It's going to be hard if it's wintertime. Whatever the case may be, all those things would take place. Now, I want you to notice the transition here. You're going to see all of this. Jerusalem surrounded, the temple surrounded, not one stone left upon another. You're going to be able to, it's going to be so evident that you can get out of town ahead of time. All right? But then I want you to notice this transition here. But of that day and that hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Now see, premillennialism wants to apply that to the rapture. Nobody knows when the rapture is going to happen. But this day that Jesus is talking about is a completely different day. It's not in any way connected with the idea of a rapture or a 7-year tribulation. Nobody knows when it's coming. And look, we'll be about our normal business. As of the days were Noah, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. You know, just like before the flood, they were eating, drinking, they were marrying and giving in marriage until. Nobody knew that that flood was coming until the day that Noah entered the ark. There was no sign for those people. You go back and read the first 5 chapters of Genesis, 6 chapters of Genesis, I guess in reality, and up until that point of time, we don't have any record of any flood or anything like that. The people were just going about their normal days. And look, verse 39, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Now, it's interesting there in verse 39 because that's called the coming of the Son of Man. But you know what? The destruction of Jerusalem was also called the coming of the Son of Man. But the difference is, with the destruction of Jerusalem, they would know it was about to happen. That's why he said, get out of town, because you can escape. This day, nobody knows. Just like verse 39, they did not know until the flood came and took the... Well, then it's too late. You didn't have to be too late on the destruction of Jerusalem because you know. The way Mark talks about this, let me flip over to Mark 13 and we'll end it. I didn't get nearly as far as I thought I would, but I guess I'm not surprised. You turn over to Mark chapter 13, he talks about the same thing. Mark 13:14 talks about the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, standing where it ought not. Luke tells us that they were standing in the holy place. Well, they shouldn't be there. That's only for the priest and the high priest. That's when you get out of town. Leave. You can escape. Why? Because you would know. You could see it. There was evidence. All right? It's called the coming of the Son of Man. It's a tribulation. All right? The Son of Man is coming. It was evident. You could see it, and you could escape it. Mark 13:32. But of that day and hour knows no one, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Tell me those are the 2 same days now. That one, you could escape, that you could see coming because there were armies surrounding Jerusalem. But then the same day, you don't know when it's coming. There are actually people who believe that. It's called preterism, AD 70 doctrine. They believe everything ended at AD 70. But anyway, there's a day coming when everybody could see it there in Jerusalem. It was a local judgment because you could escape it. And if you're outside the city, don't come into the city. This is something quite different. Nobody knows except the Father. So what do? Well, you watch and pray, for you do not know when the time is. That cannot be a reference to the Great Tribulation of premillennialism because they say the Great Tribulation will precede the 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. And yet we are told we don't know when the time is when he's coming. Premillennialism says he's coming after the end of 7 years. Jesus says you don't know when it is. So which are we going to believe? Are we going to believe a system that pulls verses out of context? Let me pull this back up here real quick, such as Isaiah 2:12, without regard to context, Zephaniah 1:15, Matthew 24:21. Are we going to follow a doctrine that just pulls a verse from here and there with no explanation of purpose and audience? Or are we going to go back to the words of Jesus and listen to him say, you can escape the destruction of Jerusalem, this great tribulation that's coming, but there's a day coming that nobody knows of, and all you can do is watch and pray. Premillennialism, I don't know, and I know I need to wrap it up here, but premillennialism is one of the worst doctrines of doing this. Okay, there's a verse in Isaiah, there's a verse in Revelation, there's a verse in Matthew, just kind of like cherry picking one verse with no regard to context. When you set these passages within their context, you cannot come up with the premillennial theology. It's not possible. You have to piece together things that are in no way connected. You know, one thing is not the other. And that's what we're dealing with here. So I know I've already gone over 30 minutes. I need to wrap it up. But let's pick back up on this tomorrow. And because I've still got, I think, 6 or 7 passages to look at. And I see that I've got a question here. Let me scroll through the comments real quick. Sheila's not getting notifications. Well, that's not good. Wayne says it was in their generation. Yes, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all say that, don't they? In their generation. Deborah asked, in another lesson, could you cover one will be taken and the other left behind? But okay, so Google, look for the Left Behind series. I think the guy that was part of that was Tim LaHaye. Left Behind, that's a premillennial movie. I've never seen it, but I've heard about it. So yes, I'll tell you what, Deborah, I'll do that tomorrow since it's fresh on our minds and it's in the context of Matthew 24 and Mark 13, and we'll do that tomorrow. Sheila says people don't pay attention that in Matthew 24 there are 2 questions that are asked, and they take it as one, which would make Scripture contradict itself. Absolutely. And that's just it. When I have a particular view that I want to hold, I will manipulate Scripture if I have to. And that's what folks do with premillennialism. That's what folks do with the preterist doctrine of AD 70. They butcher Matthew chapters 24 and 25. On one hand it says you can know and you can leave, and on the other hand it says you don't know when it's coming, and they say, well, that's the same day. That's the same event. It's just completely foolish. Anyway, all right, guys. Sorry I went a little long today, but it's kind of necessary. We'll come back tomorrow, Lord willing, at 11 o'clock, and we'll just pick up on this passage as used, let me see here, pull it back up here for you. We'll just pick up on this passage as used, because I've got some others that I want us to look at, and so we'll do that tomorrow. Thanks, hey, Derek. Yeah, Derek says that's what you call rightly dividing the word of truth. Thank you for making it so clear. Thanks, Derek. Thanks for watching today. Derek's one of my elders here at Mammoth, and good guy. All right, guys, thanks again. Hope to see you back here at 11. And we'll pick up where we left off.